Hey everybody, today I'm going to be zeroing in on geraniums. So that means I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite varieties, some of the characteristics of geraniums, as well as maybe some care tips and suggestions that I have based on my experience growing them. And I'm going to start with one specific type of geranium because unlike petunias, where I was able to just talk about petunias from small to large, geraniums fall into very distinct categories and it can get a little confusing if you're not used to it. So I'm going to start with what I think is the most common one that people think of when you say geranium. So when you close your eyes and say geranium, people usually picture this upright plant, has these dark green leaves. They're usually paddle shaped or lily pad shaped leaves, and then they have big bright red balls of flowers up at the top. That's what most people think of as a traditional geranium. The truth is it's actually not a geranium at all. It's actually called a pelargonium. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. And I always just call them geraniums because that's the name that has been kind of pushed on these and adopted to just call these as general geraniums. Real geraniums are actually perennial and they look very different, but doesn't matter. For this case, we're just saying geraniums. And when we talk about zonal geraniums, they get their name not from the zone they grow in or anything like that. They get their name from their leaves, and there's kind of these bands of color on them, and they call them zones. And so the zonal geranium gets that name from the zones of color on there. And usually the color is green and dark green, but sometimes there's different colors in there as well. So I'll show you some of my favorites on those because there's some pretty extraordinary ones there. But I'm going to start with the smallest varieties of zonal geraniums that I'm familiar with, and there are tons of varieties of geraniums out there. So there's no way I'm going to cover them all, but I think this is going to give you an idea of kind of the different sizes, characteristics, and things to look for in these geraniums. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a series called Presto. So this is a very compact series. They only get about 8 to 10 inches tall and wide, and they're known for being very uniform in size and shape and flower coverage across the different colors, which isn't always the case with every type of variety. They also have really nice dark leaves, so that's always beautiful because it contrasts nice with the colors of the flowers. And the big thing I want to point out is that geraniums are not always red. So when you look at this series, you can see lots of shades of reds and pinks. There's also some whites in there. Most of the series have some type of salmon or coral, but I want to warn you, when you're looking at salmons and corals in the geranium world, the definition of that color really varies. So some of them are very pink, some of them are very orange. You're gonna have to probably see the flower to know if it's the exact color you're looking for. So if you're thinking, I definitely want coral, but you haven't seen the bloom, the color might not come out exactly how you're expecting. So be careful about that when you're getting into colors, especially coral and salmon. Then there's another variety that's also very small called Tango. So Tango is small, has a little bit more colors than what we saw with Presto, and these get a little bit bigger, 10 to 12 inches. And we'll take a look over here at the Tango Strawberry Ice because look at the color on that. That's a bicolor geranium. So you can see sometimes we can get multiple colors on one bloom. Really attractive color on that one. And staying small, the Moonlight series stays about 10 to 12 inches as well. And this series is especially popular because it has so many different colors. But I will point out one specific color, the Moonlight Ice Blue Zonal Geranium. There are a couple series that have a blue geranium. Let me warn you, it's not blue. Remember, we're talking horticultural blue, which you've probably fallen for it in petunias, where blue actually meant purple, purple actually meant magenta. Gets kind of annoying. Well, in this case, it's really like a magenta or hot pink color with just a little tint of blue. You really only notice the blue if you have it next to another more pink variety. Almost looks like someone kind of put it in a washed out dye or like a wet magic marker and just kind of gave it a little bit of a blue tint, but it's not really blue. So when you see that shocking blue or whatever name they might give it, don't expect blue. It's not going to happen. Now the varieties I just mentioned most of the time are propagated through vegetative cuttings, so they have a mother plant and they're taking cuttings off of it and rooting those and getting their plants off of that. But you can also get geraniums from seed. Now some of the seed varieties aren't going to be quite as vigorous. They might not get quite as many flowers. It really varies. There's some really good varieties of seed geraniums out there. There's some that are just so-so. Truth is, people are usually pretty happy even with the seed geraniums until they see some of these other ones that are propagated differently or different varieties, and then they go, oh, I want that, I don't want this. But hey, if you're growing seed geraniums, you're probably going to be able to be pretty happy with them. You just might want to pack a couple more in or pack them in a little tighter so that they look a little bit fuller. That's been my experience. I have not grown a lot of seed geraniums though, or worked with a lot of them. So I'm not an expert on the seed geranium category, but the first seed geranium that I'm going to talk about is also another small one. It's called Nano, and you can see it has all the basic colors, and this is one that you can grow from seed. Another popular variety you can get seeds for is the Multibloom, and this one is known for flowering early. For the professional growers, geraniums that bloom early have a little bit of an advantage because anything that's blooming is going to sell faster than something that's not. So Early bloom times means that they can get it out on the bench or they can get it out to their stores a lot earlier. Also, when we're dealing with these compact varieties, they like those too because they can a lot of times sell these seed varieties in packs because they stay small, so they can stay in those packs for a longer amount of time. They also have shorter stems, so that shorter stem means they're a little bit easier for travel, yet having that early bloom time kind of makes them the perfect little plant to be able to have. But there are some disadvantages because they do tend to stay small. People might be expecting that, you know, all geraniums are the same, but these are going to be kind of the most petite of them all, and the impact is going to be a little bit less. They're going to be better for your containers and maybe even hanging baskets or things like that. In the landscape, they could possibly get lost against your other plants unless you plant them in a big drift and have a lot of plants tucked in there. I mean, they can still do their job out there, but I think you're going to find as I start talking about some of the other varieties, there's, I guess, some advantages to having some of the bigger ones. Now I'm going to move up in size just a little bit, and these are going to be more of those workhorse geraniums. They're that little bit bigger, they fill out pots a little bit nicer, and they tend to stand out compared to some of those more compact varieties. So the first ones I'm going to tell you about are Fantasia and Dynamo. So these are kind of sister varieties. Big difference between them. The Fantasia has a little bit darker leaf. The Dynamo has a traditional green leaf. Sometimes the Dynamo is a little bit more vigorous as well, but you can see there's lots of colors to choose from. These are really good performing varieties, as is the Sunrise series. This is another one that's known for having a lot of different colors, and it's from the same breeders who developed the Moonlight series. So Moonlight is the smaller one, Sunrise is the mid-sized one, and then they get bigger from there. Now, I do want to point out one color in here. So there's the Sunrise White Zest, and you'll notice this one has a really high contrast bicolor flower on it, and you can see right next to it the purple Big Eye, also bicolor, not quite that same contrast, and we are seeing more and more of these unique colors coming out in geraniums. So far, all these varieties I've talked about have been zonal geraniums, but zonal geraniums have a couple disadvantages. Their biggest one being is that they're known for kind of petering out when it gets really, really hot. Now here in Michigan, zonal geraniums do fine. They can handle our heat, but when you get into the really hot temperatures down south, then a lot of times they'll say like, yeah, they look good in the springtime, and then they quickly just fizzle out on us. So what the plant breeders did is they took a traditional zonal geranium and they combined it with an ivy geranium. Ivy geraniums can handle the heat. They're actually happiest in the heat for the most part, and they combined those two together and came up with a variety called an interspecific. And so interspecific basically means they've intermixed two species. So interspecific, maybe that'll help you remember. So these varieties are hybrids, and they're going to have characteristics of both. So most of the time, the interspecifics usually have a leaf that looks a lot like a zonal. They may or may not have the zoning pattern though. Sometimes they're going to just be solid. Every once in a while, you'll see one with more of an ivy geranium type of leaf, and ivy geraniums have a really kind of crinkly, waxy leaf, and so it's a little bit different shape to it, and I'll talk more about ivy geraniums a little bit later. One other thing about zonal geraniums though is that they're the ones that have the big, beautiful, double blossomed flowers with the giant colored everywhere. So while they get their heat tolerance from the ivy geranium, they do usually get a lot of the characteristics of the flower of a zonal, because the zonal is one that it'll have double petals, really dense flower coverage, whereas the ivy geraniums usually are more singles, a little bit smaller flowers on them. So when we get into the interspecifics, the combining of the two, they're going to run the gamut from really packed flower balls to even the singles. So it kind of depends on what they've been bred for. And there's some really interesting things that they've done with these. So I'll get to some of those later, but the first interspecific that I'm going to tell you about is a new one called Solera. It came out last year, and this one has been getting really rave reviews because of its heat tolerance. It's really doing well in those hot areas, so people are really talking about it. There's only a few colors right now, but it is not the first interspecific by far. There are plenty of other ones, and I'm specifically right now talking about that kind of, I call them the workhorse, the mid-range ones. This one's like 12 to 14 inches tall and wide. The next one I'll tell you about is the Moxie, another interspecific, also 12 to 14 inches tall. Gets a little bit wider though. And the Moxie is known for its kind of really impressive flowers and flower colors. So the flower heads tend to be nice and big. And then a couple of the colors are a little bit more unique, like the Moxie Deep Rose Mega Splash and the Moxie Pink Splash. Really beautiful flowers on those. I do like the Moxies. They tend to be easy to grow. They're kind of got this nice kind of habit to them, and they do fill out a little bit. And that's one thing you're going to start noticing when I talk about some of the interspecifics, especially as they start getting bigger. Interspecifics, although they don't trail like an ivy geranium. Now, ivy geraniums, like they trail, like they go over a pot and all the way, they'll stretch as far as they can usually. Meanwhile, these interspecifics have a little bit of that habit where they kind of go over the edge of the pot. So zonals tend to be more upright. The ivy geraniums tend to be more trailing. I always consider the Interspecifics a little bit more cloud-like. So they're kind of a little bit of both. They'll kind of drape over the edge of the pot. They'll only cover like a small pot. They don't like do any of that, you know, extend past the pot, and then they tend to have their clusters of beautiful blooms on them as well. So a little bit different there. So I hope I'm making sense here when I'm talking about zonal versus interspecific. And now just as I start talking about interspecific, I'm going to bounce back to zonal because there's some seed geraniums, they're zonal geraniums, that are in this size range as well. So I'm trying to keep us kind of in the size. So as you're thinking about geraniums, if you're trying to get a seed variety that's going to be similar to these other ones, you're going to want to look at ones like this Bullseye geranium. And the Bullseye is very unusual in the sense that its leaves have a really high contrast in the zonal coloring. So the center tends to be a really dark color, and then the outside rim is a really bright color, really high contrast. I love these. They really stand out even when they're not blooming. You notice these. You'll see these, you know, from far away. They're absolutely beautiful. I'm a big fan of them, and I am going to show you, since we're talking about the different zones on these, there are some other varieties that have been bred specifically to have super high contrast on them. So this one is the Vancouver Centennial, and this is Mrs. Pollock. And so you can see these both get kind of orangey red flowers or orangey flowers. This one I think is more orange. This one's more orangey red. The flowers are nice, but they're, you know, really it's all about the foliage. When I look at these, I think like, doesn't it look a little bit like a heuchera? I mean, they're really, really gorgeous ones. Again, I kind of am a sucker for those bright leaves. So anyway, kind of sets those geraniums apart. Okay, now guess what? We're going to be moving back to interspecifics. So I hope you're able to keep up with me here. Interspecifics, again, are those hybrids. They have those characteristics of each, but these two varieties are different from a lot of the other zonal geraniums because they do have the single flowers. So their flower heads tend to look a little bit more like an ivy geranium. And so they have a very different look to them. This is the Caldera and the Caliente series. And these have some really great characteristics. So I've grown the Caldera Lavender Glow. I love the flower on this one because the color changes as the plant ages, and it's absolutely beautiful. It really does look like it's glowing. I had this one growing on my front porch. It only got morning sun. So a lot of times they're going to say, oh, geraniums only perform well in full sun. I've been able to push them into part sun pretty easily and didn't have a problem with them. And this Lavender Glow only got its morning sun, I think by 11 o'clock. Just got, you know, just the regular indirect light, but no direct sun after that, and it did absolutely beautiful. I had it with, it was a Hot Plus Aqua Lobelia. Oh, that was a really nice combination. Those two colors look really, really nice together. I also grew, I think it was the Caldera Red, although it could have been the Caliente Deep Red. I grew that in my back deck, and one side of my deck is under a tree, and this spot that I put it in got zero direct sun all day. It did get a lot of bright indirect light, so it was never in deep shade, but it definitely did not qualify as a sunny spot. And those things bloomed consistently, looked great the whole season. I was very, very happy with them. And that's the case with a lot of these geraniums, that as long as they're getting good indirect light, they still tend to perform pretty well. The nice thing about the flower heads on these is that they have those single flowers and they're pretty much self-cleaning. So the single flowers, the petals just kind of fall off, and then you're left with these little kind of, what are they? I don't know my plant anatomy all that well, but they're the little things that stick up. So it looks like a little sparkler sitting there. And then eventually those little things kind of fall off, and then you're left with the stem, and then the stem just kind of falls off. Now, you of course can go in and clip those off, but if you've got a spot where maybe you can't reach it very easily, or it's kind of an area that you're not going to be just walking by and, you know, popping off dead blooms, because that is one thing about geraniums, that they do benefit from just snapping off the spent blooms and any kind of leaves that look bad. So you just kind of follow the stem all the way down to the main stem, and then you just snap it off really easy, or you can use snips if you want, doesn't matter either way. You don't want to leave though, like where you cut it halfway and just leave a stick there, because that tends to turn yellow and it gets a little unattractive. But this variety here though, compared to especially zonals, like zonals, if you don't keep them deadheaded, they can look a little rough, and also those petals can land on the leaves and damage the leaves as well. So it's not heavy duty cleanup on geraniums. They're pretty easy, but these are like the easiest of the easy. I will definitely say that. And the big difference between the Caldera and the Caliente, the Caldera tends to spread just a little bit more. So if you're putting it in the landscape, it will kind of cover more space a little bit more quickly. And I have seen both of these in the landscape, and they are like primo. The Caldera Hot Pink, wow, the flower on that is such a bright, intense color. It stands out from a distance. So if you plant a couple of these in a spot, so let's say you put 3 or 5 or more, it just creates an entire kind of carpet, not in the way that petunias and some of the other flowers do where it creates a pillow. This creates more of a texture of color. It's really quite extraordinary. And so I've seen that one, and I also saw the Caliente coral in the landscape. Looked fantastic. Really nice color. It's like solid, bright, intense color, and those petals really held up. And I was a big fan of seeing these in the landscape, and I've only grown them in my containers and I loved them. So they can be in either spot and they look fantastic. Now there's a new variety that also has that single flower, but the flower is very, very different. Take a look at these Glory Days geraniums. The flowers on these are extraordinary. And this kind of bicolor striping that you see, that's something we often see in an ivy geranium, and these here are absolutely stunning. We had a couple of them blooming earlier, about 2 weeks ago here, and all the staff were just stopped dead in their tracks, and it completely enamored with these two blooms. Both colors are fantastic. I'm a big fan though of that red-orange bicolor. It doesn't really look that orange to me though. It looks really quite red, but absolutely stunning. And the pink is beautiful as well. So if you're more of a pink person, definitely one to consider. It's the Glory Days, brand new this year. And so I don't know how available it is, but it's a beauty. Now staying in this size, maybe getting a little bigger, is another seed variety that I'll tell you about. So if you want to grow from seed, there's the Marcada. This one is known for having a little bit more of an ivy look to it, and it has really long lasting blooms. That's its kind of claim to fame. This next variety is another seed variety, also gets just a little bit bigger. It's the Maverick series, and this one's another really popular one, really wide range of colors. People love the Maverick because of that size and gets good flower coverage as well. And then one last seed variety in this size range is one called Quantum. And what's interesting about Quantum is take a look at those beautiful flowers on it. They have these much more star-shaped flowers on them. The petals are really long and narrow. And also, if you look at the leaves, they're much more serrated, kind of look a little bit crinkly as well. Now, I haven't grown the series, but I did have a Starry Pure White last year that I picked up at a garden center, and I fell in love with that plant. It had those beautiful star-shaped kind of petals, really unique flower. The flower lasted a long time on that one as well, and it kept flowering for the whole season, petered out a little bit in the middle of summer, but it was only for a really short period of time. I was a big fan of that one. And another seed variety is called Pinto. This one tends to be really well branched, and you can see lots of colors to choose from on this one. Another medium to large zonal geranium is the Mojo, and this one is known for its dark foliage. We've grown a couple colors of Mojo here, and the size of them have been pretty nice, big flowers on them. And then there's the Supermoon, and you look at it and you go like, well, it only has 3 colors. Why would someone want that one? Well, this one has extremely dark leaves, like really, really dark green. And the Supermoon Red has been my sister's favorite variety. Mainly, she says, because for some reason, those flowers on that plant last forever. So she loves putting them in her deck rails. She puts them out there, and she says, I forget to clean them at all. And she said, I probably clean them twice a summer, if that. And she said, I never noticed them looking bad or looking rough. They're really full, and that dark foliage is really compact and dense as well. And then the flowers just kind of sit on top of it. And so that's her favorite. So this is her go-to, the Supermoon Red for dark foliage. The next series is the Americana, and this is supposed to be the best-selling geranium in America. You can see really good color assortment here, and it is one that you'll see at a lot of garden centers. Grows really well, really consistent, does a great job. Now we're going to get into the definitely large geraniums. These are larger plants, oftentimes have nicer, bigger flowers on them as well. And so the first one I'll tell you about is the Maestro Idols. And this one is known for having a really high flower count. This one gets really loaded with flowers, and they're very consistent across all the colors. So Maestro Idols is one you can kind of count on to be a little bit showier, really nice one if you can find it. And then there's the Brocade series, and this is one of my favorites because look at the foliage. It has those beautiful contrasts, that dark center with that bright green rim on it. Good flowers on these, and the colors are really true to what they say. So the orange is really orange, or I should say the fire. And then also like the salmon has a really good salmon color. The Cherry Night does have a nice red with just that little bit of pink fuchsia hint to it. So it's not really red, just has that little bit of cranberry hint to it. So really nice series. I love the leaves on this one. And this one is bigger than the Bullseye series. So if you want something a little fuller with that same leaf effect, this is a really good one. And then I'll throw in a standalone zonal right here, and this is the Rosalie Antique Salmon. So this is a little bit more of a novelty variety, but boy, the flower on this is insane. It is so densely packed with petals, you like can hardly get your finger through to it. It is gorgeous, and it's a nice, really pinky salmon. So where I mentioned orange versus pink when you talk about salmons and corals, this one is very much a pink. Like a lot of people will interpret this one as a light pink, but when you look close, you do see that little hint of peach peach or orange in there as well. And this one, beautiful dark leaves on it, fantastic flowers. The only thing you have to be careful of is that because the flowers are so thick, when they start to go, they do start looking a little ragged and rough. They last a long time, and that's all you have to do is snap them off. It'll produce new ones pretty quick, and so it's a really beautiful one. This one is one of those that it deserves its own category. I would love to see some more colors in this because that flower head is just like nothing you'll ever see in a regular geranium. Now in this larger geranium category, there's one called Big Easy. This is an Interspecific though, so this is one of those hybrids, and it has been bred for having the biggest, most oversized blooms out there. They are like, sometimes they get like not quite grapefruit size. I'd be exaggerating if I said that, but you can see beautiful flower colors as well. This one definitely stays in more of the reds and pinks at this point, but really nice series. And one of the most popular large zonal geraniums is the Rocky Mountain. So this is the one that when I travel around the Midwest, the Rocky Mountain is really commonly seen at a lot of the garden centers. They really like this one because it's nice and full, gets big flowers, and it's just really consistent. This is one that they put in their kind of display pots because it stands out, looks really great, and it's a consistent performer. So Rocky Mountain definitely is one that you're going to probably see out there. Has a lot of vigor, a lot of heat tolerance as well. So it's known for holding up a little better in heat than some of the older varieties of zonals. Another very large, very heat tolerant variety of zonal geranium is the Galaxy. So Galaxy gets really big. Beautiful colors on this, and one thing I like about like the Galaxy is that the colors are really true to what they say. So like the orange really does look orange, and the salmon is what I would consider a salmon, maybe more on that pink range of salmon, which is a really attractive color as well. And they have some fun ones like the Raspberry Sizzle, which is a bicolor. Another Interspecific that I'm a big fan is the Mantra series, and the reason why I love this one is big flowers, big plant, large everything, dark leaves, beautiful. I had picked up one, I think it was the Mantra Magenta, loved it. So then last year we carried them, or maybe I picked up a pink, it was pink and Mantra are the two that I've grown so far. This year we had to get the bright red as well because it's just such a beautiful plant. And the flowers, if you're giving it that fertilizer, because they do like fertilizer, geraniums tend not to need as much fertilizer as some of your other plants, but if they're getting regular fertilizer, they're great. But I will say that geraniums for the most part grow better when you grow them just a little bit on the dry side. So this is a plant that you can let it dry down completely, then start, give it water, wait till it dries down again, give it water, and it's perfectly happy in that situation. It can handle consistent moisture as well, but for the most part, it is pretty drought tolerant. You can give it a lot of abuse, at least here in Michigan. When you get down south, I'm sure there's some other nuances as far as watering that you have to be careful of, but for us, man, these things can just take the abuse. In fact, when they have a little bit of drought, they tend to flower a little bit more. So when we want our geraniums to flower, we starve them of water and they tend to start pushing out more blooms because I think they get in a panic mode, like, uh-oh, there's not gonna be water, we better get these blooms out there now. And it's just a really nice one. And early in the season, you're probably more likely to damage your geranium by overwatering it than underwatering it. So when in doubt with a geranium, skip the water till the next day and you should be just fine. But it's wilting and it's definitely dry. You need to get water on it as soon as possible. But if you're overwatering it, you'll notice the leaves start to get crinkly and wilty too. So check the water before you start adding more. Now, probably the most popular Interspecific variety is called Calliope. And Calliope is in two categories. There's Calliope medium, and there's like a crazy number of colors of Calliope. They have pretty much all the colors out there because not only do they have Calliope medium, but there's also Calliope large, which has almost as many colors. These are really popular. They've been around for quite a while. They're one of the first Interspecifics to come to market, and people were just amazed because they get so nice and big. These are the ones that do start, trailing over the edge of the pot, and they're just really popular that way. One thing I don't like about Calliope though is that it's definitely not a true series. So some of them they all have different growth. Now they still look good together. They're not like, none of them look mangy or anything like that, but like there's certain varieties that just get really, really big and the flowers are bigger, and it's not just specific to the medium and the large. It kind of ranges all over the place. So I'd love to see a little more consistency in this series, but this is a really good one, really popular. It's our go-to. This is the one that we sell the most of. And as far as zonals go, one of the biggest is the Patriot. Now this one's been around for a while. I don't see them adding a lot of colors to this, but it is one that when people are looking for a big geranium, they go to this one. It's just been popular for a long time. A couple other varieties that I've seen are Survivor and Savannah, but I don't really know too much about those, so I'm not gonna jump into those too much, but it's just kind of interesting to see all these different varieties when you're looking at how the size goes up. Now, I will tell you about some of the other varieties. So let's talk a little bit about the ivy geraniums, and those grow so much differently than these other two, the zonal and the Interspecifics. So they kind of deserve their own time. I have only grown one variety of zonal geraniums, and that's the Great Balls of Fire. And beautiful geranium, and people really fall in love with the leaves on it because they are that waxy, rich green color. People absolutely love that. And then they do get like this little bit smaller balls of flowers, but they kind of, you know, pop all the way down. Now, because my experience with ivy geraniums is a little bit lackluster, I'm not going to go deep dive into ivy geraniums because I'm not the right person for it. But I will let you know that there are quite a range of sizes. So the smaller varieties, like there's a seed variety called Reach Out. That one's nice and compact. And then if you want to get a little bigger, there's one called Precision. That's not a seed variety. Neither is Focus. But then two other seed varieties, Cascade gets a decent size, as well as Tornado. Then there's Great Balls of Fire. I had really good luck growing that one, and it got really big. It says it gets to 24 inches. I think mine got like more like 3 feet rather than 2 feet. So it's a really nice big one. And Ivy League is another one that gets similar in size. So again, I'm sorry I don't have more info on the ivy geraniums, but they are beautiful, and people, I mean, they get like this cult following. Like people fall in love with ivy geraniums. I've definitely learned that because anytime I mention the Interspecifics, people are like, they don't have that tidiness that I see in my ivies, and I love the wax leaves and that type of thing. So people do love those. Another type of geranium that I do want to tell you about, they're called like the Regal variety or Regal Elegance, and these are also known as Martha Washington varieties. So these have really big kind of double blooms. A lot of times they're bicolor as well. They have that serrated kind of crinkly leaf as well. Now these kind do tend to peter out in the summer. So when even here, like they'll bloom beautiful and they look fantastic, especially great Mother's Day purchase. But once we get into the heat of summer, they tend not to flower that much. Sometimes they'll start blooming again later on in the season, but they kind of are a little more, have a limited bloom time. And they also are ones that you're going to want to keep cleaning them because all those extra petals sometimes can be a little messy. At least that's what we found to keep them looking good. They're a little bit more work, but boy, they are gorgeous when they're in bloom. So absolutely stunning. And then the last type of geranium I'll talk about is the scented geranium. So the citronella is the most common one that has kind of that lemony citrus smell. It's also known for kind of being a bit of a mosquito repellent. Now you do kind of have to have it like on your skin or be touching it or kind of letting the oils out in order for that to really work. So a lot of people say, oh, I just put it on my porch and it keeps the mosquitoes away. I don't know how effective it is. There's been a lot of people saying, oh, not effective at all. Other people swear by it. So take it or leave it. But that's not the only type of scented geranium. There are some really cool ones. My mom and dad used to carry a lot of the scented geraniums. They had grapefruit scented ones and chocolate scented ones, and just really cool. Pineapple, I think, might have been one of them. It was really cool to go through and you kind of smell them, and each one kind of hits you a little bit different. In fact, last year I think we had the grapefruit one. It was really pretty nice. And the different scented geraniums, some of them don't have any flowers. Some of them will have some flowers. They're going to be more the singles, and a lot of times they're bicolor. So they'll be like a really pretty, like hot pink and burgundy with a light color on them as well. So very kind of nice looking colors. It's not necessarily a plant that gets a nice habit though. A lot of times they kind of look a little wild. Now there is the perennial geranium. Not going to touch that one right now. That's a whole nother story. That's a real geranium. So we'll save that for another time. But hey, thank you guys for watching. Hope you find this helpful. I will put my little chart that I made with the size gradation of these and my groupings on them. I'll put the link in the description of this video on YouTube, so that way you could find it. I also have my petunia information there and some hydrangea information there. So there's a couple downloads on that page. You can just check that out and download the ones that you think are valuable to you. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you guys all very, very soon.